So we I like that lovely picture. That is really wonderful. Okay, hi, I'm just going to close my door, which is going to make me very hot. Sorry. Okay, hi everybody. First of all, I'm very impressed with anybody who actually can listen to a share on Thursday night. I was out just before and someone was telling me while they're doing their cooking, they're listening to, I think it's Rabbi Haber, and I can't do that. If I'm cooking, I'm sort of humming or something like that, but to actually do two things at once. I know they say women can do two things at once. I can't. So thank you for those of you who are still here. Feel free to go off to sleep or go and peel your potatoes or whatever you've got to do. Okay, so I just want to first of all say how we're going to do this for Ezras Hashem. We're going to there's a very busy parsha, this parsha. I love it, but there's got so many different things in it that you could spend a couple of weeks on each little bit. But we're not going to do that. We're going to be very ambitious. And what we're going to try and do, Ezras Hashem, is look through the whole parsha twice, once on a surface level, once on a deeper level, and then we're going to start putting it all together. So that's kind of our plan for Ezras Hashem, and we'll see how far we get with that. So quick question. If you're one of these really cool Zoom people who puts things in chats, you can. Otherwise, just think for yourself. How many books are there in the 5 books of the Torah? That was a trick question. Okay, I'm telling you now, that was a trick question. The answer is not 5. And the reason we think there's 5, right? I'm going to use Lady's usual caveat. I'm going to be using the way I would pronounce things. If I use a pronunciation that's not familiar, just sort of wave at me or interrupt or whatever you want to do. So there are officially 5 books in the Torah, but actually, about halfway through the book of Bamidbar, just under, in this week's parasha, we stop halfway through the parasha. There's a nun that is backwards, okay? So normally a nun is facing towards the end of the sentence, and now it's facing towards the back of backwards, away from towards the beginning, okay? And we have our nun. We have 2 pesukim, and then we have another nun. So we've had book 1, 2, 3 is the beginning of Bamidbar. 4 is those 2 verses between those 2 nuns. Then we have the end of Bamidbar, so that's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, okay, and 5, 6, and then 7 is the last book, which is Devarim. So it's actually technically 7 books, although there's also 5 books. So we're going to have to do, and one of the Mepharshim, the Midrash asks us, why do we need this division? It's very unusual to have a division rang in the middle with these backwards nun. And Rashi brings the Midrash, and he tells us that this is to separate between 3 different unpleasant, bad things that happen. Now, we're going to have a question on that because, as far as we can tell, there's only 2 things that happen that aren't right, and they're both after the nun. So that's going to be one of our many questions. We're going to ask lots of questions as we go. And just to keep you listening, I'm not answering them all straight away. You have to listen till the end to get there. But we try and keep track of all the questions as we go. And if you don't worry, because I'll go over them with you. So, right, so we've got these negative events that seem to be happening, and we want to separate them out because it's not nice to have a run of unpleasant events in Torah. Okay, so, but except that sort of doesn't really work somehow, kind of, unless we look at it in more detail. Like most of these, if you've got to look at it, you've got to look at it in detail. It's not going to go. So we're going to run, okay? And I know I talk fast. I will try not to talk fast, but we've got a very short time to do a lot of pesukim. We're going to whip through an overview of what happens in this week's parasha, stick in some questions as we go back and look at them again, but Ezras Hashem, and try and find something that's actually going to work for us as women living in this day and age, and something for Ezras Hashem that we can work with. Okay, so first thing that happens in this week's parasha, bearing in mind, please, that the Torah does not always go in chronological order. It often goes in thematic order. So the order that Hashem put things in the Torah isn't necessarily what happens on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. It goes in an order that works according to what Hashem wants to teach us at that time. And the commentaries often get really busy with that. Why is it in this order? But so first of all, we've actually got something, that doesn't seem to be in this week's in order particularly. It talks about the menorah. Now, the menorah in the Mishkan, which was their sort of temporary portable temple, their portable Beis Hamikdash, the menorah there is actually talked about way before this, at the end of the book, towards the end of the book of Shemais, so ages ago. We did that in sort of February, March sometime, right? And all of a sudden it's coming back here, and Aaron the priest, is told that he is reminded, actually, because he knew this anyway, is reminded he is going to be lighting this menorah, and there's lots to say about that. It's going to be lighting this menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's going to be one of his many jobs. Okay, that's the first thing. Question, a couple of them, right? If you get these, it doesn't matter. We'll go about them. But here's our question. Why does it say it now? Well, we can answer that one. Rashi, again, brings the Midrash. He tells us that just it's reminding us of something, because the the princes, they're called the Nasim, the princes, the rulers of our of each tribe had brought offerings. They've sort of filled in all the gaps that were missing in the building of the Mishkan. And Aaron apparently sitting there going, well, they've brought everything there is to do. And they're the princes of their tribe. I, Aharon, am the prince of my tribe. I'm the leader of my tribe. Well, how come I'm not bringing anything? And Hashem says to him through Moshe Rabbeinu, don't worry, you and your descendants are going to light the Torah. Now that is a really, really lovely question answer. It's a really nice idea, but there's another question with that, which is, but he knew that anyway. What is Hashem? And also, the next question we're going to have about Aaron is, I know the menorah is very nice, but it's kind of a day-to-day job. Tell you what it's like. It's like, near me there's a center for senior citizens, and it's covered in plaques, right? There's a school where I work, which is plaques, like this was donated by this person, and this was done. You go to any community building, and there's plaques here and plaques there, and it's beautiful that Klal Yisrael give money, usually in memory of somebody or to honor somebody, and they give money for buildings and for this, that, and the other. But sometimes you get these institutions and they can't actually pay the cleaning staff or the nurses or the teachers or the whatever else it is. So you've got this gorgeous building, which people like to fund, like you put a plaque up, but you never have the cleaning staff wearing a T-shirt saying this cleaner was funded by the something fund. It doesn't happen. We like to give things that feel eternal. So paying for the cleaner to clean the floor one week is really important, but nobody does a plaque for that. It's part of human nature. So what is special about this? What is Hashem telling Aaron is going to be eternal about what he's doing? About what he's doing, okay? And the Ramban tells us that really in here there is a hint to Hanukkah, right? So it's a long time away, Hanukkah, but he's telling him that you wanted something eternal, you're going to get something eternal because of your descendants, because here is the Hanukkah story with Kohanim, because of your descendants, we will always light Hanukkah menorah. So you're going to bring light to the world in the darkest winter because you so much wanted something to change here, okay? Right, hold that thought. We'll go on to the next bit, okay? Next bit happens after that, the Levian, right? The tribe of Levi become consecrated, which is a dead good word, and it basically means they become the ones who are going to serve in the temple. And before this, it was supposed to be the firstborns. It becomes the Levium. Aaron actually has to pick them up and wave them, so he did a huge amount of strength to do that. So you might be seeing a theme here. The firstborns used to be they would have been in charge of serving in the Beis HaMikdash temple, but they couldn't because of the incidence of the golden calf. So that was then taken away from them, and it became the Leviums. It was going to be this, and now it's going to be that. Can you see that? Aaron HaKohen was just going to have the menorah to light. Now, because he's done something different, he's going to have it, perpetuity. That's another good word, right? He's going to have it for a long time. The Bechorim, the firstborns, were going to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, and now they're not. Now the Levium are going to do it as a result of something that happened. And here's a question, just bear this one in mind, very interesting. Rabbi Jacobson points out the grammar here. Hashem says in the Torah, he uses the phrase Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, 5 times in 3 Pesukim. Now the Torah doesn't waste words. He goes Bnei Yisrael, this, Bnei Yisrael, that, Bnei Yisrael, the other. It should just say them. It doesn't. Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, this, that, and the other. And the Midrash tells us to show how much he loves us. Here's this question, okay? So we had question 1, what is Aaron HaKohen getting out of this whole menorah business? What are we learning from that, and why is it here? Question 2, why at this point, what have the Jewish people done that suddenly makes Hashem, really want to express his love and approval for us? Okay, so that was question 2. If you forget it, I've got it written down over here. That's why I have to keep looking sideways. Okay, next one. Next thing that happens, right? We have quite a big gap when that happens. And then Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, they've now been in the desert for about a year, and Hashem says it's Pesach time, right? It's going to be Pesach. Everybody has to make Pesach, and they're making Pesach. And along come, you might know this, along come a group of people who cannot bring the Pesach offering, because to bring the Pesach offering, you have to be what's something called tahar. It's really badly translated as pure or clean. It doesn't mean that. It means tahar. It's a certain spiritual status. And if you have been, for example, if you are, say, the Chevra Kadisha, and you've been involved in dealing with people who passed away, you're not tahar, you're tameh until until you've gone through a certain process. So there's lots of reasons why somebody might be tameh, and therefore they couldn't bring their Pesach offering. So they come to Moshe and they say, well, we really want to bring the Pesach offering. And Moshe says, but it's not your fault. You are something called patar, which means you're not obligated, right? If somebody chas v'shalom, you know, breaks their ankle, then they can't go to Jerusalem to build this. So they're putter. It's not, there's nothing against them. There's no sort of negatives in Shamayim about them. They haven't done anything wrong. They just simply couldn't do it, right? If you, you know, if there's so many things that if you haven't stolen anything, then you can't do the mitzvah of giving it back. So there's lots of mitzvahs that you just can't do. And they go to Hashem, they go to Moshe, who goes to Hashem, and Hashem says, you know what? They didn't have to, but I'm giving them the option. You might know about this, of something called Pesach Sheni, right? A second option to bring Pesach, and that is new. Okay, they've asked for a rerun, even though they don't have to. If somebody on purpose missed bringing the Korban Pesach, it's another story. But somebody who, through no fault of their own, can't bring that Pesach sacrifice offering, gets to have a second chance. You seeing this, ladies? Okay, so we've had something's happened. It's not anyone's fault. It is, or is it something's happened? Something's changed, and because of that, something's changed. Everything's swapped around. Okay, so that's a third time that happened. We thought it was going to be situation X, and now we've got situation Y. Okay, there's been a shift, and some people like it, and some people don't like it. And what are we going to do with it? Okay, right. Here we go. Change of topic, except it isn't really. Right. Okay. Just going to skip a bit so I know what I'm looking at. Right. We get to the bit where we're talking about the Jewish people traveling through the desert. So until now, they've been more or less in the same place. Okay, they've all been at Har Sinai, right? And they're waiting there. They've done the second Pesach, okay? And then we have a bit of a description, okay? Description goes like this. I'm not going to do it in too much detail, but it's important to follow as we go along. So we know when the Mishkan is built, the temple is built, and there's a cloud that covers the Mishkan, the central temple bit that's in the middle of the Jewish people, okay? And that goes there. And during the day, when it's light outside, it takes the form of a cloud. And when it's dark out, right, in the middle of the night, it takes the form of a fire. So when it's light out, you get a dark cloud. And when it's dark out, you get a bright fire. So you can always see it, okay? Because you've got that contrast, okay? And here's how it's going to go from now on, says the Torah. When it's time for the Jewish people to move on, because they're moving through the desert, the clouds will lift up and kind of fold itself up and start moving. And that is the cue for everybody to get up and to pack up. Everyone packs up when the cloud rolls itself up. And when everyone's packed up, the cloud starts moving off, and the Jewish people follow it. And the cloud goes in front so that it can get rid of any snakes and scorpions and horrible things that you get in deserts. Okay, so it's protect them, goes along. When it's time for them, and it could go all day and all night, technically, right? It could go back into being a fire at night, and they could be dry going through the night. Okay, that's that option. Okay, and when it's time for them to camp, when Hashem wants them to stop, the clouds kind of spreads, unfolds, right? It's been like a pillar, right? Going like this, then it spreads itself out, so it's kind of flattish, and that's how they know where they're going to camp. Okay, and we've got a lot of psukim that say this. Okay, I'm going to go through this with you because it's really, we're going to go back to it later. Okay, when the cloud goes up, after this, the Jewish people travel from where they were, and it says Al Pi Hashem, by the mouth of Hashem, they traveled, and by the mouth of Hashem, they rested. They would camp. Okay, every time, all the day, whenever the cloud it goes down, that's where they stop. Okay, and it says sometimes the cloud would stay for a nice long time in one place, and they could stay, and the Jewish people would stay there. It says it's the Jewish that they v'shamru mismeres Hashem. They kept what Hashem wanted, and they didn't travel. The Ramban says even if they didn't like it, it could be a really horrible place that they ended up. It didn't happen like that, but technically it could be a place they didn't like, and they would stay there until the cloud's going to move. On the other hand, so sorry, yesh asher yamim mispara. Some days they hadn't even unpacked yet. And technically, the cloud could say, all right, pack up, we're going again. And again, Pasuk says, on the words of Hashem, they camped, and by the words of Hashem, they traveled. And there's sometimes, it says, when they was just literally overnight, they didn't have a chance to get anything done. It was kind of like a sort of a camping trip. And again, by the word of Hashem, they went, and the words of Hashem, they camped. And the Rambam points out, this is not an easy trip. Okay? If any of you, and just, I'm not even going to ask for hands up. I know the answer. Who likes packing for holidays? No, scratch that. Who likes unpacking from holidays, right? Packing for holidays is fun. The clothes are clean. You put them in the suitcase. It's very exciting. Unpacking from holidays or unpacking at the end of the holiday, we've got all the laundry to take. not a lot of fun. Now, they didn't have laundry in the desert because the cloud kept their clothes clean, but it's not fun. Packing, unpacking, sorting everybody out, getting everyone sitting down, what we're going to get, what we're going to eat for supper. Just when you think, well, how long are we staying here? Is it worth unpacking? Is it not worth unpacking? Do we even know what's going to happen tomorrow? No, it's quite unsettling. Okay, and it's one of the major merits that we have as a people, that Hashem still remembers about us, that we just did it. If we're staying, we're staying, and each day we don't know what's going to happen. Are we staying? Are we not staying? Are we going? Are we not going? You wouldn't know until it happened. And the fact that we did that, it's the pasuk tells us is one of our merits. Okay, but off they go. They never know where they're going to go, but they keep following Hashem as they go. And the Torah talks, we'll just skim this bit, about trumpets that are made. So they blow trumpets when they're ready to go. It talks about all the various princes, the leaders of the tribes. Okay, and then now we have another change. Yisro, okay, hope you're following this. We've got a lot to get through. Yisro, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, decides it's about time he left. He's been with them ever since Har Sinai, ever since the Torah was given, and it's time to go back now. He says, you're nearly in the land of Israel. I'm not going to get any of this. You know, I'm not Jewish. It's for you lot. So I've done all I can. I think I'll go back now. And Moshe Rabbeinu begs him to stay. He says, you're going to be our eyes, which means, you know, could mean more than one thing. Okay, could mean you're our guide. It's also translated, you're a fresh look at things. When you look at things, Yisro, you come up with things that we wouldn't have come up with. You're looking at things, and bear this in mind, with a totally different point of view. You're looking at things with a fresh eye, and we know that Yisro did innovate a lot of things. And the Moshe Rabbeinu took to Hashem, and Hashem said, yes, so there's loads of things that you look at with a very fresh eye. Again, he's seeing that kind of concept that there's a way of things changing, that things don't stay the same, they don't stay the same, right? Are we seeing that? Okay. And he convinces him to stay, and he says to him, look, you know what, when we get to the land of Israel, your descendants, your children, whatever, are going to have an area which is theirs until the Beis HaMikdash gets built. So we're saying it's temporary, but it's not that temporary, because it's, you know, about a couple of hundred years. So they've got quite a while of some kind of land of their own, and that's the inducement to stay. Okay, so off we go. And then we've got our little, and then, so that's happened, and now we start traveling. So we've had all the different things that are happening to get the Mishkan ready. We've had a description of what happens when they travel. And then we're told they finally, at this point, they're going to leave Har Sinai, right? They're going to leave. So Yisro's going to go, you know, Yisro's nearly same time it's up now. And it says, and they're going from the mountain. And the verses tell us they were quite excited to get moving, right? They'd been there a long time. Underneath that, okay, we'll get to this. Underneath that, there's this, okay, let's get going before they give us any more instructions. But they're excited to get going, and off they go. They go for 3 days, and the cloud is going in front of them, protect them. All looks wonderful and lovely. Then we have our 2 nuns with 2 verses that explain the Pesukim, the verses that Moshe Rabbeinu said when they would camp. And then you have those nuns. Okay, so something's happened just before that, which we're not sure is so great. We're not sure what it is. And then we get to a bit of a negative bit. Okay, here we go. You following so far? Just shout at me if you're not, because we're racing through this very fast. But I want to see if we can pull it all together before everyone's kugel comes out the oven, and before the challah gets too yeasty, and all the rest of it. So we've got our 2 nuns, okay, which we've said are splitting up between something that happened before and something that happened afterwards. Okay. Vayhiyam, it says the people were. This is a really good word, ke'misaynanim, which is translated as people who are like complainers. Well, that's the English word, right? The Hebrew was a really good one, misainen. So the word ein means sorrow, right? The same word, you know, as sorrow or pain, right? So they're not in pain, right? That would have been easy, okay to understand. They're misainenim. So the word, when you have a is in a word, it's something you do to yourself. So for example, a nadava is a present, but someone who is misnadav is someone who volunteers themselves, right? So because they're kind of give them, you know, they are the presents, or they are the gifts. Okay. So misainen is somebody who kind of makes themselves miserable. Okay, so there is pain, but they're kind of making themselves miserable. And they're not even just making themselves miserable. They are misainenim, like people who make themselves miserable, kite complainers, and they're not even like, they're like that. There's some kind of something going on that they're looking for an excuse to be unhappy, and they start complaining, and they're complaining. They're complaining about the trip. Now, to be fair, the Mepharshim say, right, to be fair, it's a really hard trip. Right, they're going here, they're going there, they're packing up, they're going again, they're packing up, they're going again. But the Ramban tells us that even then, there's another perspective, which we're going to get to. They start to complain, and Hashem, it says Hashem is angry. Obviously, Hashem is not angry as such, but it's how we experience it. And a fire comes on the edge of the thing. The people cry to Hashem, to Moshe. Moshe davens to Hashem, and Hashem says, all right, enough. They've learned their lesson. And you'd think that they learned their lesson. They've learned that it's not okay to sit there getting miserable and complaining. After all, you're getting your laundry done by the clouds of glory. The way is clear that you've got food at your doorstep. The man fell from Shemayim, from heaven, and they had food at their doorstep if they were righteous. If not, they would have to go out and get some. But there was food available. There's drink available. Clothes are cleaned. Everything's wonderful and holy, even if it's a bit of a difficult situation. Okay, so they shouldn't have been complaining. Okay. But 2 pasukim later, it says we have the asaf, which is the people who are gathered. Okay, we'll talk about them maybe another time. And they start complaining again. And the reason they're upset is because the thing about the man was it was a very spiritual food. Okay, so it fed you and it nourished you, but it didn't sort of make you feel good. And when you were eating it, it kind of tasted this. It didn't have to taste the same all the time. The more righteous people got to choose any tastes, but it felt the same. So if you're a very highly spiritual person and you're only eating to keep yourself alive, then the man is great, right? It does what it's supposed to do. It's like, if chas v'shalom, if somebody's on a drip, it's keeping them alive. But you can't say if they were, like a food drip or something like that, you can't, it doesn't feel very nice. You can't eat it. You don't feel full afterwards. You don't get the taste of it. So the people who were anyway unhappy and anyway miserable weren't necessarily on the highest spiritual level. So they anyway weren't really enjoying the man as it is. And they start to complain, we wish we had meat. We wish we had, it's got a whole load of things here. Courgettes and watermelons and onions. And if you read Rashi, it's quite cool to look at what they are in French. It talks about them in French, okay? And the Torah reminds us, the man wasn't like that. It didn't have much of it, it tasted, it was there and it was nutritious. And if you were on a very high level, you could get, the flavors that you wanted. But it wasn't, for some people who wanted a more physical experience, it wasn't a particularly enjoyable physical experience. So everybody's crying and complaining and crying and complaining. And at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu loses it. Very unlikely. And he says to Hashem, why have you done this to me? It's a very interesting complaint. He says, you've given me this whole big burden. He says, did I give birth to these people? Right? I didn't carry them. I didn't, I didn't conceive them. I didn't give birth to them. I didn't, I should have to carry them like you carry a baby. I can't give them meat. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying. He's saying the food they had was in his merit. The Malbim tells us the food was in his merit. So he's fine so because he's a spiritual person, the food they're getting is a very spiritual food. He's saying they're complaining because the food they're getting in my merit is not actually something I can do anything about, because this is how I am, which is fine, and this is what and I'm there, he says, Malbim tells us, as a teacher. My job is to teach. So a teacher's job is to work with, your brains or your neshama, whatever they're teaching. Okay. He said what they need is, if they're looking for, the physical things, they're looking to be fed, and which is important, right? You need your physical things. You need, your gashmi. You need to reach your comfort. Moshe is not saying it's wrong. He's saying, I can't do this. This is not my job. You're going to have to find somebody who can understand them on their level. He says, you, Hashem, you give them meat. You can do everything. You can give them food on their level, even though you are, of course, Hashem, and you're above everything and anything. And Hashem sort of has a bit of pity on him, and we're not going to get to this, but he appoints 72 actually elders to support Moshe, so that the people, so it kind of spreads out all the moaning and the groaning and all the complaints. So it's not all landing on Moshe Rabbeinu, but there's also other people who can empathize and sympathize and be there. And those other 70 people, we're not going to get to in detail. Those other 70, they're called the 70 elders, 72 actually, because there were 2 who were also included, another 2. They then become extra support. They also know what it is the people need to hear, just like Moshe Rabbeinu gets it as a prophecy. They get it in a different way, and they also get to spread that out. So that happens, but because they've been complaining about that meat, Hashem does send meat. He sends slav, they call that quails, like a little desert bird thing. He sends that over, and he sends a plague or a punish with it for the people who are complaining too much. Okay, and right at the end of the parasha, which again is a whole piece in itself, we have quite a famous story of when Miriam Moshe Rabbeinu's sister and Aaron, his brother, are speaking about him and in a way that's almost negative because he had to separate from his wife, included in order to get prophecy. And Miriam gets saras, which is a form of spiritual illness. Moshe Rabbeinu has to daven for her to get better, and everyone waits for her to get better before they move on again. Right. So that was a very, 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 very fast summary. But let's just go back to some of our questions while we've got the time. Okay. We've got loads and loads of questions. It's all revolving around that little bit in the beginning where we talked about those nuns. What's dividing what from what? What is it that was before? What is it afterwards? What's pulling it all together? Where are we going with this? Okay, so one of the things we really need to look at is this idea of what changed. So one of the understandings is that when we said they left Har Sinai just beforehand, that's where the change started. Once they were moving away from that place where they had the revelation, they lost something or other. There was something that wasn't quite right. But Rabbi Bolshansky points out a medrash says like this: before that middle bit, those nuns that are facing backwards, and afterwards is pretty similar in all those cases we talked about, right? From the beginning, from the menorah, from Pesach, the second Pesach, from putting the Levium instead of the first ones, having a second chance at Pesach, okay? Traveling and getting up and down and moving around all the time, all of those, okay? And then the fact that they're having to move and it's unpleasant and it's difficult for them, and they would like to be able to just not have to have all that packing and unpacking, okay? And the fact that all of that, there's this spiritual food, but it's not like they used to have it. There's no meat, there's no cucumbers and watermelons. All of these can either be seen as reasonable or unreasonable, but they've got, and the elders and Moshe's father-in-law, all of them, they're all about this concept that things are changing. And when things are changing, it's how do we deal with it? What are we doing? The Midrash points out, so Rabbi Shansky, that before those nuns, the way people deal with change is the right way. And afterwards, it's not necessarily the right way, okay? So let's have a look at that again, right? We're going back through again, but not as fast and not all the bits, so you can breathe for a minute. Okay. Aaron Cain wanted to light something. He wanted something that wasn't going to change. So yes, he's lighting that. He wanted something that was going to be his legacy. And Hashem says, okay, that's a reasonable thing to want. You would like some kind of a spiritual legacy. So you're going to be lighting the menorah every day. Okay. Your descendants are going to light the menorah every day. And in hundreds of years' time, your descendants are going to light a menorah that's taken away by the Greeks. And after that, even when there's no Beis Hamikdash, people are going to keep lighting lights because of that change. So you've got that perpetuity of lighting lights and bringing light into the world. And the Torah tells us that every day when Aaron Cohen went up to light this menorah, it's the same job every day, right? You climb up some steps, you clean out the old oil and whatever else it is, and you light the new light, okay? But every day for him was like a fresh day. It was a fresh start, okay? So this is how he's doing it. He's asked for something. He's asked for something more permanent. That's what he wants. That's a reasonable request, says Hashem. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And Aaron then carries on doing his sort of the bit that was before, the bit that's maybe a bit, less exciting, but he does it with a freshness and excitement. Okay. Now the next one, we talked about those first ones, and we talked about how they're all of a sudden not serving in the Mishkan anymore. And we talked about how this is, Hashem says at this point, how much he's proud of Klal Yisrael and how much he loves Klal Yisrael. Why? Because nobody complained. At this point, no one's complaining. Why? Because they're seeing actually this change somehow or other is okay. They might not have liked it, but it was an okay change. Okay, so we've seen that there's some changes that you can ask Hashem to do something about. Some changes that Hashem said, okay, this is the way it is, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you have to work with it. Okay. Pesach Sheni is the next one. They could have said there's a request. It's a reasonable request. Hashem, can you change the system? Hashem says, look, I can't change the rules. If you're not supposed to bring Karban Pesach, you can't. I'm not changing my rules, but I'll find a way to make it work. Okay, so you can have change that Hashem will change. You can change things. You can accept the way it is. You can find another way to make it. We can find another way to make it work. Okay, and all this traveling, right? And we're going to get back to this. This is the most beautiful, beautiful concept. Okay, but this again, the traveling. It says, by the mouth of Hashem, they moved. By the mouth of Hashem, they camped. Okay. And the Ramban says at the point when they were getting it right, it's the biggest merit because of that uncertainty of when is there going to be a change? When are things going to be different? Is it going to stay the same? Is it not going to stay the same? We don't like it as human beings right? We like predictability. We like to know what's going to happen. So because they weren't aware what was going to change when, right? There's very, very big merit. When they left Har Sinai, things changed, right? Leaving that place where they'd had this, we had had this huge revelation of Hashem, started to change things. What's the complaining? They're complaining about the thing that a few minutes ago we were saying is a really big merit. Okay, the Ramban says they should have been so happy. Yes, they had to pack up and not pack up, but they're going through the desert. And, says the Ramban, we knew that Hashem was going to sort it out, because you know what? He sorted it out yesterday, and he'll sort it out tomorrow, and he sorted it out last year. Why were they getting them? Why were they trying to find excuses to be miserable when there was another way of looking at it? That's what the Ramban tells us. The difference between those nuns, right? The difference between the bit before and the bit after is not that there's a complaint. That's not an issue. It's right. This is very radical, okay? Because I know these days it's very unfashionable. It is, hold it, ladies. You can throw stones at me later. It is okay not to like things. Faint, shock, horror, right? And because these days we're all very into everything has to be positive and everything's wonderful and you're not allowed to be miserable. Like, yeah, you really are. Okay, shoot me later. It is really okay not to like a situation. What's the difference? The difference is what you do when you're in a situation that you don't like. Sometimes you can change it, or you can ask Hashem. We can't change anything, right? Sometimes you can ask Hashem to change it, and sometimes he will, and sometimes he won't. But there's a kind of a secret to being okay with that. Okay, the Torah never ever tells a person not to feel an emotion. Well, there's some emotions we're not supposed to feel, like jealousy and that sort of thing. But if something is sad, if something you don't like, it's okay not to like it. What's not okay? To be misowned and to make ourselves more miserable than necessary. Now, that's all very beautiful and wonderful, but I can't do that. It's funny because I was preparing this share as I was, in bits and bobs over the last few days. And I walked in today and I had a really long day. And you know what it's like when you walk in a house and this is here and this is there and you want a different. So I was like, and I caught myself. Thank you, ladies, that I'm giving this share. And I caught myself letting myself be really annoyed about the state of whatever it was. Kind of remember the kitchen sink, probably, right? There is a bit, isn't there, where you can kind of realize, or we can realize that we're letting ourselves get carried away with a feeling, right? We're letting ourselves get miserable. It's fine to be miserable if something's sad. It's fine to be angry if something makes you angry. There's a little bit where we kind of let it go a bit too far, or we let ourselves react in a way that we don't really want to. Now, that's all very nice and holy, but in the moment, what do we do with it? Let's go back one more time into our parasha. Okay, here we go. Change is, like we said, unavoidable. I remember many, many years ago, Joanne, do you remember teaching me this? When I was in a class with you teaching how to teach colors, and your first thing you said, hope you remember, was that any adjustment is hard. And that is true, even if it's what we would see as a positive adjustment, right? So, somebody gets married, then somebody has a baby, a boy becomes bar mitzvah, a girl becomes bas mitzvah, somebody graduates, you get a new job. It can be something you've hoped for and dreamed for and worked towards, but any adjustment is really difficult. Okay, so positives that can be hard to adjust to, and things that don't seem positive are hard to adjust to. We just don't like changes, do we, as people? We're quite, sometimes, even if something's not good, we sometimes find people who really reasonably are more comfortable with something not being right than risking getting it better. So I actually remember saying to somebody once who was very, very anxious about, well, more or less everything actually. And I said, what would happen if you weren't anxious, if you just decided not to be? And she was very honest. She said, I don't know who I'd be anymore. Sometimes we just, I don't know, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Sometimes it's safer to be in a feeling than to shift out of it, because adjusting is really, really hard. It's hard to move out, to move out of any kind of a way. But the Torah helps us. It says like this, right? We did this bit, I'm going to read it. It tells us when they were ready to travel, right? So Rabbi Jacobson tells us, understands on a deeper level, when they're ready to travel, okay? During the day, when it was light out, there was a dark cloud to show them what's coming next. And at night, when it was dark out, there was a fire showing them where they're going next. Now, that's actually what happened, literally, but on a very personal level, because things change, right? And because we know things are going to change, sometimes it helps. Sometimes it helps to remember the context. Now, I'm going to put a caveat. This does not mean, right, that when someone's having a brilliant day, you tell them it's all going to go wrong. And when someone's having a bad day, you tell them it's going to be right. But you can learn from everybody. So we're going to learn a little bit from the ancient Romans. Now, the ancient Romans were a really horrible lot. They were bloodthirsty, they were nasty, they just weren't very nice. But one of the things that they did, which you can learn from, is when they would win a war, they would do this kind of procession, right? And the general who had won the war would be in a chariot, and everyone would be cheering, and all his poor captives would be schlepping behind. That wasn't nice, okay? And behind the general, there would be a slave, and the slave would hold like a wreath, a laurel wreath over the general's head. And that's what you see in lots of pictures and sculptures. But what a lot of people don't know is the slave had a job as well. If you were very, very close, you'd see the slave muttering. And what the slave would have to mutter to this victorious general is, it's not going to last, it's not going to last, it's not going to last, it's not going to last. Now, there's two ways you can look at that. You can say in terms of, well, that's not very nice. But there's a bit of a mini wisdom to it, because the wisest of all men, King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, had a ring engraved with the same kind of words. Well, he came up with first, Gamse Ya'avar, things will pass. And the idea is not that we're supposed to never be really happy and never be really sad, but we are supposed to remember that there is always another side, right? When everything looking wonderful, it could be there's a bit of it that's not so wonderful, and that's okay, because that's just being human. And when everything's dark at night, then we have that flame to remind us there is such a bright thing. Dina Friedman talks a lot about how whenever we look at anything in the world, Hashem's always put in a balance. So for every time you're in a situation which seems very, very difficult, somewhere in there's going to be some kind of spark of light. And every type of situation in which is really positive, somewhere in there might be something which, if you're not careful, is going to annoy you, right? Okay. I remember here's another one of yours, Joanne, I think as you told me this, that, I think it was when somebody gets married, there's always going to be something when you're making a simcha that annoys you that nobody else knows about, right? So it could be they play the wrong music. I have a friend who's very into wine. She made a simcha. It's a Friday night simcha, so everything's already there. She gets there on Friday night and it's the wrong rosé with the fish. Now, that wasn't bother me in the least. I don't know anything about rosé or fish, but for her, she's like, it's the wrong rosé, it's the wrong rosé. What are we going to do? It's the wrong rosé. It took so much energy for her to remember she was making a simcha, right? Because there's always going to be that in everything. It's never going to be that complete. But for us as human beings, it's very hard to remember. So Hashem said, here, I'm giving you a present. As you're traveling, right? You're traveling with what Hashem wants. The pastor keeps saying, Al Pi Hashem. They went because Hashem told us to. This is whatever we're doing, whatever Hashem sends us, whatever change and adjustment is coming from Hashem. And we're just remembering there's a cloud, there's a fire. Things change. Things really do change. And that doesn't mean that you can't be happy when you're happy. That doesn't mean if you should have a simcha, we should all Ezra Hashem have simchas, that you've got to sit there the whole time going, oh, it's all going to go wrong. You don't have to do that. But there is a way that we can deal with things by keeping a sense of context and a sense of proportion and saying, this is from Hashem. And whatever Hashem wants is going to be the way it is. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't ask for a change, because we saw in the parasha, people do ask for change. Right? The Aaron and Kayan asked for a change. Hashem said, yep, okay, you have a change. That's great. The Bachurim, the firstborns, had a change they didn't particularly like, because, they couldn't now serve in the Beis HaMikdash. But that was a change that was something that wasn't going to change. So they accepted it. And Hashem said, okay, you've, presumably asked for change. You haven't, you've accepted it. And being okay with that and finding something to do with that and being all right with it is one of the reasons Hashem said, this is why I love you. This fact that you're okay with this change and you're moving it around, right? So that's why Hashem says our name 5 times, to show how much he appreciated, as it were, that we're doing that. Okay, right? And even, all of these things, all of these areas are happening. Okay, so again, the next one after we've got our firstborns, okay, we've got our Pesach Sheni. We ask for a change. Sometimes you can't help it. You were tummy. Okay, you couldn't going to come Pesach. Is that the end of the world? Well, it could be you're just not going to be in Korban Pesach, and then you didn't. And it could be you'll ask for things to change. But again, on the words of Hashem, they traveled. I'm just watching the time because I know we have to finish in a few minutes, right? On the words of Hashem, they traveled. On the word of Hashem, they rested. And the pasuk, they do this. It says it 3 times. The third time, it says they kept. I'm going to find the words now so I get it exactly right. They kept the words of Hashem, right? They keep the words of Hashem, meaning it's what is Hashem wanting, right? Here we go. They kept the word of Hashem, okay? And whatever Hashem wants that to happen will happen. Doesn't mean you have to, be over the moon about it or not over the moon about it. It can be difficult, but this is it. Okay, this is what Hashem wants to happen, right? I just want to put in a caveat over here, right? If you go to a simcha and you have a happy occasion, please do not say to the person who's running the simcha, you do know it's all going to go wrong, right? Okay, well, you know, Hashem wants to be like this, but it could have been like that, okay? And if chas v'shalom, I don't know, somebody falls over and break their ankle, and they're yelling for the ambulance, don't tell them, stop shouting for an ambulance and say, thank you, Hashem. Like, that's not the right time, okay? So we have to be a bit tactful and a bit diplomatic. But one of the things that Torah is telling us, and we're going to go right back to the beginning to show this, is like this. We said about Aaron and his menorah, starting the same menorah every day, day in and day out. Torah tells us each day was like it was a brand new job. It's a brand new job. It's exactly the same as he did yesterday and the day before, and it's not so nice cleaning out oil. It's again, but every day is a new day. And one of the many, many things this parasha is telling us, right? It's always interesting, by the way the parasha is divided up isn't a mistake. And the first of this parasha is Bahalaischa, which means when you raise up. How do we raise ourselves up? Sometimes it's really easy, right? Sometimes Hashem just puts in our hands and it's a very easy way, and it's a very easy way to grow. And it's a very easy way to grow. And sometimes it's not so easy. How do we raise ourselves up? We work with it. We kind of roll with it. It's okay to be today's not a great day. Okay, so today's not a great day, but it could be tomorrow will be different. Could be next day will be different. Yesterday was different. Things don't always get better straight away. That's also true, right? Okay, but there's a balance, you know. So anything at all the Torah is telling us, it's okay to be ayin, it's okay to be sad. It's not okay to make ourselves sadder than we anyway have to be. Okay, I'm not going to say it's easy because it is really, really hard. And again, please do not say this to somebody who's having a bad day. Oh, well, you're going to take this in context. Please don't do that. It's so tactless. But for ourselves, right? Okay, for ourselves, when it's going well, this is amazing. It's beautiful. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. We saw those journeys, right? They're journeying, and 1 minute it's wonderful and it's marvelous, and they're thanking Hashem for that. Even though they're traveling all the time, they're being grateful to Hashem. Next minute, it's not so good. All they had to do was remember 2 days ago when they were all right with it. Okay, and it's easier said than done. But sometimes things are great, and when it's great, we hold on to it. We hold on to the lighting the menorah bits of our life. We hold on to the bits where we felt uplifted. We hold on to the bits where we could, you know, do the equivalent of the Pesach Korban or whatever else is. Those we hold on to. Hashem gives them for a reason. And then when it's not so great, we're like, okay, you know what? There's some good bits in there somewhere. We ask Hashem, could you change it? I don't like this. Is there possible, please, Hashem, that you could change it? And we can do that. There is nothing at all. We actually have a mitzvah, the Ramban says, if we're not happy with the situation, we can ask Hashem to change it. Hashem, you know, and that's what we do when we daven. We have the end of the parasha. Moshe davens to Hashem to heal his sister. We said that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to daven to Hashem to change things. And sometimes Hashem says, like in the case of Miriam, sometimes Hashem says yes straight away. Sometimes Hashem says, no, sorry. And sometimes Hashem says, yeah, but in a little while. So Miriam, for example, when she had her saras, Hashem said she has to wait a week. And everyone waited a week, and then she was healed. So it's absolutely the right thing to do to ask Hashem to change things. And then we sit there and we wait. And is Hashem going to change it? Or is he not going to change it? If he's going to change it, thank you very much. If he's not going to change it, I'll live with it. I'll work with it. I'll find a way through it until it does change, because most things kind of change a little bit. And then the last bit is that we're okay that things are going to change. Things do happen, and sometimes we want them to happen, and sometimes we don't want the change to happen. But I'm going to give us all a bracha that all our changes and all our adjustments should be for complete and utter simchas, and only positive things, and that we should be able to find the positive in everything, but that everything should be easy, a situation which is easy to find the positive and the uplifting sides in it. So I'm going to wish you a beautiful Shabbos. Joe, you're making challah here as well? She's gone. Robertson?
Thank you so much. I don't think she can hear. I think she is.
She's gone. Wonderful.
You're busy with the chalamek.
Oh, she's doing the other chalamek. Right. Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. It was amazing.
I'm going to wish you a beautiful Shabbos. Sorry, that was such a very, very fast run through a very long parasha, but I hope we managed to get something out of it. Have a beautiful Shabbos and a beautiful week.
Thank you.